January the 15th, 1970. Does it ring a bell? Well, it is one of the most significant dates in the life of this nation, Nigeria. And it is not as popular as October the 1st, quite all right, but the events leading up to that date still resonate in almost all spheres of the nation's polity. We have chosen to commemorate that day as the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. And the natural question to ask is, what are we remembering? Well, for one, we're remembering the end of the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War. Nigeria has come a long way since that incident, which almost tore the nation apart. It's been 50 years, but as you might agree, the scars still remain, especially for those who were directly and indirectly affected, like the armed forces. The men and women of the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy paid, and they continue to pay huge sacrifices to defend the nation. They didn't go to bed after January the 15th, 1970. In fact, they've been actively involved in peacekeeping across the continent. You might remember ECOMOG. The Nigerian military was basically the backbone of the Economic Community of West African States ceasefire monitoring group in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And for over a decade now, we have lost gallant soldiers in the fight against insurgency. And yet they continue to give more because this war is not over. So tonight on the program, we ask, what's next after all the pomp and pageantry, if you may, of the Armed Forces Remembrance Day? Beyond the comments and the insinuations around the pigeons that seemed reluctant to fly, how do we ensure we continue to do right by our soldiers? Tonight on the program, Honorable Babajimi Benson joins us via Zoom. He's the Chairman, House Committee on Defense. Good evening and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on the program too.
Well, you are at the Armed Forces Remembrance Day commemoration in the nation's capital, Abuja. Yes, there was a lot of talk about the pigeons, which is a symbolic part of the ceremony. So if you could just tell us, what was that event meant to achieve essentially?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. The event, as you all know, was to commemorate our armed forces. They fought gallantly during the Civil War. Some of them fought during the First World War and the Second World War. And a lot of them are going through the crucial battle with the insurgents in the Northeast. The armed forces, as you well know, in Nigeria, they are involved in about 36 operations throughout the length and breadth of Nigeria. So it's a day to commemorate them, January 15, to show them we care, to show them they're part of us, and to also show that we are with them in the battle to ensure that Nigeria is free and safe and that Nigeria attains the eminence that its good qualities offer.
Well, you know, it might be difficult for a lot of people to appreciate the journey of the Nigerian Armed Forces holistically without a look at some of its antecedents. You've touched on some of them, but from the Civil War to, in fact, the coups, a lot of people will talk about the coups and, of course, the rest. So just how much have those events shaped our armed forces to what we have today?
Yes, the First and Second World War, the Civil War, are landmark events that happened in the days of yore. The Civil War, particularly the armed forces, is very, very involved in the democracy we're enjoying today. They helped ensure that peace was attained in respect of the Civil War. And in the present day Nigeria, the insurgency, the armed forces have played a yeoman's role in ensuring that no territory in Nigeria is ceded to the ISWAP or the Boko Haram insurgents. So they're playing a critical role in stabilizing our democracy. And I'm sure in the fullness of time, their good works will also ensure that we still continue to enjoy this stability and a lot more.
Okay, well, we're going to get into some of the things we need to start doing, I mean, after that event. But, I mean, you sit in that committee as the chair of the Defense Committee, and I'm sure you hear a lot of stories. Going for that event, leaving that event, and, you know, juxtaposing that with the stories you have heard, some of the, you know, sad stories, really. What did you leave there with? Did you leave with a resolve, or really just help us understand? What did you leave that event with?
Okay, I left there with a lot of purpose in my heart, a lot of respect for the armed forces, a lot of encouragement, a lot of KPIs that we're also going to set to ensure that the armed forces drive us to where we want to be. We're not there yet. A lot still has to be done for them. A lot of welfare issues, a lot of also making Nigeria understand that the armed forces they're not a separate entity. They're part of us. A lot of their men and women are members of our family. The armed forces is paid from taxpayers' money, so we pay them. So Nigerians pay them. So Nigerians own them. So I also realize there's a bit of detachment. The Nigerians see them as just an armed forces that is not part of us. Mm. So I went away there thinking of the Nigerian Orientation Agency needs to do more, needs to be able to speak to all Nigerians in the nooks and crannies to ensure and to knock it in their heads or in their consciousness that these armed forces belong to us.
Right.
So we must also be up and doing when it comes to providing intelligence, information, and things that would add value to what they do.
You talked about KPIs. It's something we usually hear in the corporate world. Yes, I mean, you've sat at different corporate board meetings. So it's interesting to see how you bring this to bear when it comes to defense and the armed forces. So let me begin by asking you, over time, when you've looked at the budgeting and different policies and the rest that we've come up with for our armed forces, would you say that we're doing right by them well enough?
That answer is an emphatic no, and I'm going to just oppose that answer with one of your data analysts, Ogusowo. I watched him a couple of months ago, and how he captured his thoughts really left an indelible mark in my chest. He said that he compared the defense of the Man City football team and compared it with how much Nigeria is spending in defending its territorial integrity. It was an abysmal comparison because the Man City defense spends higher on its defense than Nigeria is spending on protecting its territorial integrity. So when it comes to funding the armed forces, there's a lot that can still be done. We also understand that there are other priority projects. There's health, there's education, but we're not funding the armed forces as much as we should be doing. And that also has to do with inflow of what we get. I understand that, but we need to find journeying on out-of-the-box ways of funding the military. Because show me your military, show me the effectiveness of your military, I'll point to its inventory. The inventory we have can still be upskilled in a lot of ways.
You know, when you talk about spending, really, it involves the welfare, also equipping, really. It's a whole gamut. So help us understand, if you can, where are we right now? You could tell us where we're coming from, but where are we and where do we need to get to in terms of that spending for welfare, for the well-being, equipping, and the rest?
Okay, when it comes to welfare is good because under this administration, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and the President of Nigeria recently signed a document called the MAFA, which gives priority to the welfare of the armed forces. It's an unprecedented act that he did, and I must commend him tremendously for that. When it comes to inventory, so the welfare, so far so good. The inventory is where I have the slight problem with. We need to upscale that. We need to be able to purchase equipment in a very nimble way. We also need to create additional funding so that our military are better equipped than they are now. So I'm saying that the military, when it comes to equipment, can do a lot better. because, like I said earlier, show me a good military and I'll point to inventory and platforms they have. We're not there yet due to paucity of funds, due to the way the world is nowadays. But we're still we're building blocks, and I'm sure within the end of the administration, we'll be able to upscale and be quite where we need to be.
When you say we need to purchase military equipment, platforms, and the rest in a nimble way, what do you mean there?
Yes, I mean that, okay, it is only very few countries fund the military on the balance sheet, on the budgets. So in Nigeria, for instance, our military is funded by the envelope system in the budget. This doesn't allow us purchase or buy equipment as nimble or as quickly as possible. So the parliament, in its wisdom, is thinking of setting up an armed forces support fund that would also allow other sorts of fundings to come into military procurements.
Okay. Now, still on procurement, a lot of Nigerians will remember, last year, that video they must have seen on social media of General Adeniyi, speaking about the military's resolve in the fight against insurgency. But then he was asking for equipment, basically saying, well, this is what we have. It's not enough firepower to combat the terrorists. In fact, he was talking about some of the equipment that had been damaged, but still he said, we're in this fight. So when we talk about procurement, really, a lot of Nigerians will remember that case. And it begs the question, where do we place that in this, whole gamut? It's probably something you have considered also. So how do we place that?
Yes, back to what I was saying, that, yeah, we need to spend more on those equipments. We need to ensure that the logistics are in place to pinpoint the equipments to where they're most appropriately needed. So I'm saying that, yes, a lot still needs to be done in procuring inventories and platforms and firepower. The General Adeniyi video, we learned our lessons, and I'm sure a lot has been done to ensure that such occurrences are few and far between.
Well, the other side to that is the court-martial and what played out right after that. And for some, it ties to welfare, because a lot of people, especially on and off social media, said that leaves a bad taste in the mouth. So also, if we could factor that in, how should Nigerians internalize what played out then with the pronouncement of the president, for example, saying that the welfare of the military is top priority? How do we put all that in the pot, really?
Yes, like I said earlier, Mr. President signed the MOFA Act in 2017, which places priority on the welfare of servicemen. Where we have the issue, again, I want to make a distinction between welfare when it comes to salaries, emolument, debarment pay, security. They get all that as and when due. The issue that we've always had is equipping them with light weapons and heavy weapons. There's also the issue of international politics that is being played out. Even when you have the funds to procure the inventory, not every country wants to sell to you due to international politics. But they've been up and doing. They've been finding creative ways of getting the weapons in. And weapons are not things we buy off the shelf. It takes a bit of time. It takes opening LCs and production. And so all hands are on deck. And I believe that by 2021, a lot of this equipment that have been purchased will be coming into. One of it is a Tucano airplane that we're expecting by mid-July,
right,
mid-year.
Okay, so that's on the one hand. But just while you were talking, we showed some pictures of pensioners, military pensioners, appealing to the president to pay some of their allowances. And I mean, this again leaves a bad taste in the mouth. I wonder if you're involved in this. Really, what is being done? Because I mean, as you can see, these people made big sacrifices for the country, and this is not the best way to repay them. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. And I'll go back to the act Mr. President signed. He signed the act in 2017. And what the act seeks to do is it takes care of only people who retire post 2017. So those pensioners that are protesting retired before 2017. So they're saying they too should be entitled to the debarment law that was signed in. But we've taken the protest on board. I'm sure it's receiving the attention of the Minister of Defense at the moment. Once that is done, once they pass it to us, we will now take appropriate actions in looking at how we can create a preparation for it. But it's an ongoing discussion that we're having, and I'm sure there'll be a closure before the end of this week. Second of all, has to do with the minimum wage. Minimum wage is being paid at the moment at 30,000 per month to members, but the pensioners also want a piece of that pie to say that, okay, the monies should also be benchmarked at the new minimum wage. So that's also an ongoing discussion that will be deliberated and resolved within the shortest possible time.
Okay, on a final note, Honorable Benson, a lot of our soldiers are probably not watching this right now because they're probably engaged in some operation, one operation or the other, but we have to do right by them nonetheless. You talked about those KPIs. We have a year ahead of us, really, to ensure that we meet those KPIs. So I'd like a case where we can always refer to this interview at the end of a year and say, well, we ticked this off. We ticked this off. So run us through the KPIs you're looking at your committee and in collaboration with the ministry also for our soldiers, both past and present, to ensure that they're well taken care of. What are those KPIs on a final note?
The first KPI is to ensure that the insurgency, which is harming and hurting Nigeria, is brought to its logical end by the end of this year. Mr. President has said that at many forums, and we're holding the ministry accountable as well to that. We also are looking at a place where there will be appropriate synergy between all the services. We're seeing that if you look at the December, the Chief of Air Staff went to Maiduguri to have lunch with the Army. That's a sign of synergy. And furthermore, recently the Air Force bombarded the Boko Haram territory, ISWA, in proper coordination, proper synergy with the Army. So we're seeing a new year, a new beginning, and a more committed Nigerian armed forces towards ending this insurgency we're facing. So it's those two KPIs that I think will be at the front burner to ensure that this world is ended in the shortest possible time.
Well, Honorable Babajimi Benson, Chairman House Committee on Defense, thank you so much for your thoughts, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I am Kayode Okikiolu. Don't forget to stay safe. Good night.